It's hard to breathe, but that's alright. Hush.
Hey, what's going on, guys? So now we've just spoken about order blocks. We're going to be speaking about range create supply and demand zones. So even though the way I see order blocks are just pivot points in the market, the way I see ranges are more than obviously just one candle. Now within that order block, obviously there could be a few candles on a small time frame, but whatever time frame you're on and you see a range, that'd be your supply and demand zone, right? So yeah, now we've spoken about market structure. It's very important that we buy within the bullish structure, sell within the bearish structure. So we need to make sure we understand that. Okay, supply and demand is that we want to focus on the extreme swing point, right? So when price pulls back to the most extreme point in price, as long as we're staying within that certain, lower high or higher low, we're still within that current trend, right? So we want to be selling within that current trend. Obviously, once price breaks above the lower high, we'd be in bullish. Obviously, once price breaks below the previous higher low, we'd be in bearish structure, right? When it comes to understanding market, we need to understand the phase of the market. We need to understand the overall supply and demand, and we need to understand that there's two things that occur in the market. It's either consolidation or expansion. Now, if you don't know what a consolidation is, a briefly reminder is just that it's sideways correction, price moving to the side, right? There's not really much. It could mean one or two things. It could be high volume or it could be low volume, right? But obviously, if you're going to look at the volume indicator, you'd understand that. But we're not going to be looking at the volume indicator. So pretty much when price is consolidating, all it's doing is, again, supply and demand is it's just accumulating orders. So once price breaks above, we see that expansion to the upside. Again, expansion is just trending market. Once we see that expansion to the upside, we can then look to pull back. And once price rebalance itself, we can then look to obviously take a trade from this balance range, dealing range, right? So consolidation is price where it's moving sideways. Expansion is where price trending either up or down. Okay, up or down. So when we see a break to the downside, it's just simply a bearish consolidation block, right? And when we see a break to the upside, all it is just a bullish consolidation block. A lot of people, they mark off their zones using the lower the range and the highest candle body in the demand zone, and in the supply zone they use the lowest candle body and the higher the range. But for me, I just take the whole of the range. I include both the high wick and the low wick. But I don't trade this. The way I use it is slightly different to how a lot of people use it. I only draw them on because it's nice to understand what market we're in. So as you can see, price here has created demand zone because obviously it broken to the upside, created another demand zone, broken to the upside, created another demand zone, right? Broken below created the supply zone. So what we'd be looking for now is for price to rebalance itself and pull back to the open of the supply zone. Once price pulls back to the open of the supply zone, we can look to take a sell position. Okay. Also, there's a breaker block here, which we'll jump into a different video, probably the next one. But as you can see, price happens to the open of that very nicely. Okay, so if we just look at this as a supply zone, you can see here that we're looking for a retracement. But for me personally, if we were going to take a trade off that and have our stops above there, and target this 4-hour order lock or whatever, right? That's going to be only 2.89%. But I can almost guarantee that if we go onto the small time frame, we could get at least a 20% risk to reward out of this. Okay, so why would this be a valid supply zone? Because again, it broken structure to the downside. Okay, so it's very important to make sure you understand that if price is consolidating and it breaks to the upside, it's a demand zone. If price is consolidating and breaks to the downside, then it's a supply zone, right? Or also known as a bearish consolidation block. Okay, or whatever, BCB. Okay, we'll go over BCB. So in this case, it's a BCB. So in the new terminology, I invented it. But in the new terminology, you see in Discord, you'll see me mention BCB, and pretty much it's a bearish consolidation block. But obviously, I don't really like to note up my charts as much recently because I find the more notes you have is the more choppy, more noise. But as you can see, this here is a range. You could drag it backwards. That'd be one big range, anyways. Price broken to the upside, right? And also, if you look at this as well. This previous range here, false move, so it's inducing, stop being induced by false moves essentially. Liquidity sweep, taking out previous lows and then back in. So this looks like classic manipulation. So this looks like a good area point to target, right? Now, this is, I find a lot of people, they'll struggle on this. Even though price is moving to the downside, we would not look to buy because the price is bearish. Even though this has took out a high as well, that's another thing to note. I'd personally wait for that high to be taken out in order to continue bullish, right? But for me personally, right now, what I'd do is, if we were going to look at this, a lot of people would look at this and they'd look to buy, right? They'd include the whole range, and they'd look to buy from there, all right? And here's the thing, right? We may get a short-term reaction, yes, but long-term, if you want a better trade, I personally wouldn't do this. The reason why is because if we, like I said, I'll jump into this one, measure our confluences, so momentum, right? If we measure that move, let's do one more candle, right there. Okay, so from this peak in price, it took 10 bars to reach to the same point, in which it took 40 bars for price to reach the same point. So this tells us that there's much more bearish momentum and there's a lot of selling pressure to the downside. Okay, so that would invalidate this trader opportunity anyway, because this bearish momentum. Why the hell would you want to buy? So also as well, we started to respect these supply zones, right? If price pulls back into this and respects it, it's bearish, right? If it violates it and breaks above, then it's bullish, and we could look to obviously take a breaker trade. But also this is a supply zone as well, but it's just a breaker, previous demand that got violated, but it's an order block, right? So it's a previous demand zone or order block that got violated, and then it came back and retraced into it and respected it. So we switched to a sell bias, okay? And also took our structure. But just mark up your supply and demand zones, because it's very important to understand what's going on. If price breaks to the downside, again, supply zone is in control, looking for sells. If price breaks to the upside, looking for buyers. Okay, so it's just good to understand. Now, moving back to this topic, as we've seen a minute ago, if we're going to take a sell, have stops above there, whatever, target down here, it's only a 2% trade. It's horrible, right? We don't want. Don't get me wrong, 2% is nice, but we want a bigger one, right? So if we go down to the 15-minute, we can see that there's imbalance here. We can see there's an order block here as well. So if we just go down to the 1 minute, what can we see here? Straight away, we can see this range.
So if we were trading ranges, it would be very simple. We'd just take a trade off the open or the equilibrium. It depends on how you trade and want to trade. So what you essentially just do is very simple. You just open the sell limit order there, stops above the range, and target down to wherever, right? So to this demand zone. And as you can see, price gave a nice 9.38%. So that's pretty much how you trade ranges. It's literally very simple. But for me personally, what I would do is I would personally like to take a trade off this order block, because like I said, I don't trade ranges, I trade order blocks. And if we just drag that across, as you can see, price tapped into it very nicely. And again, it lines up the open of the higher time frame range. So if we were to have our stops there and target down to the same demand zone or to this new demand zone here, alright, straight away that would give us a 21.71%. So this is why order blocks are personally, in my opinion, better than trading ranges. But it's not something I trade for. But if you can spot these ranges, you usually find an order block within it anyway. But yeah, I'm not really going to go crazy in depth about ranges, because it's very simple. It's literally like whenever you spot a range, right, whether it's on a 15-minute, whatever time frame it's on, you usually see an order block anyways. So for example, if we look at this order block here, right, that price is mitigated here, so straight away we could take a trade off this, right? So this order block here is the last down candle before the move, and what you'd want to do is have your stops above the wick, because obviously that's still within this order block. And then obviously we'd look to target the lows, or down here is 12.62%. But if we were going to look at it as a range, people would monitor it like this, right? And as you can see, like we said, the order block usually lines up with the equilibrium. It sort of does, right? So from the high to low, and there's the equilibrium. It lines up with the open of the order block anyways. So when that does that, it's just a higher probability of price working in your favor, and you could get a nice trade from there. So it just helps define your entries pretty much. If you spot a range and you spot a nice valid order block within that range, then that will help, with your entries pretty much. But in terms of stops in this place, it would be above this wick, just because obviously this is the order block, so we'd have our stops above the wick, the most recent wick, right? But yeah, that's pretty much it really. It's very simple. But if you do spot ranges, just go and mark them up, But remember, you're in accordance with the trend. So here, price is moving down. I know we're on a 50-minute time frame. But the pound dollar, if you just zoom out, you can see it's overall moving to the downside anyways, right? So yeah, just go out and mark your supply and demand zones. You know, draw on these demand zones here, draw on these supply zones up here, right? As you can see, draw another range. What did the price do? Right, it tapped into the range. If we focus on the order blocks, as you can see, price didn't tap into it in this case, but that's still something I personally look for. And like I said, when it comes to breaker blocks, this would be a valid trade because it lines up with the imbalance, and you got to take a trade off that equilibrium of the breaker block. But that's something for the next video. But the moral of the story is just go ahead and mark out these ranges, and it's good that we mark out these ranges because, you know, it'll just help you with your entries. There's extra confirmation. You know it's a valid supply and demand zone. You know, this is a big range here as well. Right, so again, when we come to ranges, what are ranges? It's where they're accumulating pretty much just orders. What price will eventually do is come back and tap into that, you know, region, right? I don't know if it did in this case. I don't think it did anyways. If you just click exit and go back, no, it didn't. But later on, you may see that price might start trading up and tapping into that and then dropping, right? If we look at this here again, range, yep, draw it out. As you can see, equilibrium with the range, order block, take a trade off the open, it lines up with the overall equilibrium of the range. So you could take a sell there, stops above there, and stop, you know, takes profits down to this equal lows or down to the lows, and as you can see, it would have been nice. This order block here, it would have been fine, but if you probably wouldn't have stopped out break even if you moved your stops to break even. But as we haven't took out the previous swing structure low, we wouldn't have moved our stops to break even anyway in this case, as it's still within that range, so it could pull back, you know. But that's something for a different video. But that was a nice, you know, 4% without even going down to the you know, lower time frames in which we would have found an entry in the lower time frames. But if we go to the 4 hour, you usually see this as like a valid order block anyways. So, you know, if you were to draw this on and then you go down to, let's say, the 15 minute, it's just going to be a range within the price. Again, you can go ahead and draw out your ranges, equilibrium of it. And again, if we were going to take a trade off, which order block was it, the 1 hour time frame, it lines up with the overall open of the supply and demand zone, and when it does that, that's a higher probability of price, you know, being that level being respected. You know, when there's a range in price, we all know why there is a range in price. It's because simply they're accumulating orders, price broken to the upside, right? So we've seen a consolidation, expansion, retracement back to it. This person got violated, so what could we do at a later price? Look on the 4 hour chart, you can see there's a big imbalance there. So what we could expect now is for price to pull back into this region, because this was a previous zone that got you know, violated in order for price to continue bearish. So just go ahead and map out your supply and demand zones, and you know, if you spot an order block within the supply and demand zone, then great, map out that order block and go from there. And if it lands up with the equilibrium, then that's a high probability trade right there. So I'm gonna end the video here. Like I said, I didn't really go too much into depth about, you know, supply and demand zone ranges, but they're everywhere. It's literally, if you understand order blocks, you'll understand the supply and demand ranges anyway. But the reason why I didn't go in depth about it is because I don't personally sit there and trade it. But yeah, it's up to you if you want to. You know, if you've seen this as a big supply zone, if you want to trade at equilibrium, unfortunately price didn't pull back to it, but it might at a later date. However, if you want to trade the open, you can see that price sort of broken below, sort of tested that zone. So if you wanted to trade the open of that demand zone at a later price, you can do so, and it would have worked in your favor. But yeah, just mark up the zones, understand all the blocks, understand supply and demand. So if you haven't watched the last video, make sure you watch it, because you probably won't get a good understanding of this, because order blocks is more powerful in my opinion. I'm going to end the video here, and I'll see you on the next one.